see everybody. Thanks for coming. Bionic's been a firm for about 10 years. We do a full range of projects, and the thing on the left is a sticker. The thing on the right is San Francisco Bay. We work at all the scales in between. We're really not interested in specializing, but more in potential. Potential for a project, its ambitions, unique sites, programs, clients. And I get questions about, like, why'd you name your firm Bionic? And there's a few reasons. Number one, it's not about an individual and their name on the door, but it's about a point of view. Two, it's got an immediate connotation of the world and environment and the future, and it captures what we do, essentially by combining things that are alive and things that are made. And today we find ourselves in the Anthropocene, in the arc of human evolution. The environment is in a crisis. It's largely due to the unintended consequences of not designing life in its totality. And so the mandate for the firm is simply to enable life in this kind of increasingly complicated and technological world. The term bionic has its origins in the 60s. It became known in popular culture in the 70s through science fiction. It was a theory. The movies are always right. They always eventually come true. And it was at the time, ironically, that Design with Nature, the book by Ian McCard, made the observation that the world is under tremendous strain from, like, sort of a simplistic and resource-consumptive view of the world that's often exercised by engineers and architects. It was really making a case for the agency of the landscape architect. And it pioneered a theory about methods for designing at a large scale, compositing multiple layers of information. At that time, it was a radical idea, but it was done in the analog. It was a precursor to GIS and the digitization of the globe. And I find the term bionic to be useful in talking about the challenges to environment today, and taking it out of the hands of the engineer and into the hands of the designer. It has a connotation about restoring and enhancing and amplifying, repairing and augmenting, growing and merging things that are alive and things that are made, embedding intelligence, replacing loss, completely replacing lost functions. The idea that you can design a proxy or a simulation for something that's impossible or to bring great joy. It has a connotation of being projective, super enabling, capacity enhancing, the ability to perform higher, proactive, instantly effective. It has an ability to be an equalizing force, to shift ability and equalize ability. It has the capacity to create fun, engagement, excitement, joy, and pleasure, and it's scalable. It's the application of technology for LinkedIn. We do, the tech sector is very strong in Silicon Valley. It's moving away from Silicon Valley and a kind of diaspora across the country as the cost of living and building there rises. This project is about undoing a kind of automobile-centric way of thinking about work. So it's taking a parking lot and turning it into a place for people. There's plazas. There's a great big meadow in the middle. The universal access of the campus is tied together by this network of boardwalks. And the whole idea is centered around air conditioners. So there's $10 million that go into structural upgrades so that you can hold these air handling units up on top of these old office buildings. Those air handling units produce a condensate stream, and one day I'm sitting in a meeting with a bunch of engineers and they're talking about how to dump the condensate. And so I think of this as like a $10 million water harvester that produces clean air. And so it goes from the air handling units. It goes, and and kind of transferred down into these bird baths, and then it's used to irrigate a stormwater meadow. So most people don't know any of that. It's just a nice place to be. It's really immersive. It's got generous proportions. There's a stormwater wetland and a big meadow, kind of as a part of every day and the connectivity of the campus. It's designed for bikes and activities and gathering and social purposes. It's got a lot of kind of quiet moments to it, quite immersive. It saves a lot of existing trees, but I really think that the kind of the mechanism and the invention of the site itself was the driver and the original idea for kind of creating this sort of more powerful experience that everyone can relate to. 2 million square feet, it's a lot. 6,000 surface parking lots, or parking spaces. And so all of the landscape is one giant mechanism for managing that much stormwater, and then hosting a very incredibly specific program. So there's one of everything. There's an event center, pool, gym, gardens, lawn, amphitheater, and it connects it. There's even a sport park. It makes the water system and the program overlap with one another in really dynamic kinds of ways. It's very three-dimensional. The water system is pretty much embedded into the way that you move about and circulate. It supports a plant palette that's native almost entirely to the Santa Clara Valley. And if you haven't kind of heard about this, but a lot of these tech campuses are kind of being hyper-amenitized. And that's fine, but they also have this kind of capacity to have restore ecological functions, become very specific to their to the microclimates. And there are also there's a lot of factors to it and kind of design elements here to modify climate to make it comfortable. So there's wind screens, there's heaters, there's lots of cafes, and the infrastructure for kind of modifying the climate so that's in use year-round and day and night is sort of part of our intention of enabling this really big site. We've got several places where we're just designing a whole new chunk of the city. This is San Francisco in the lower right-hand corner. We're working on this kind of last frontier of the city. This is called the India Basin. It's a feral site, rare on the San Francisco waterfront to have a completely unbuilt site. There's not a stitch of infrastructure on this, so it'll be kind of remaking a city from below the tide line up to its vertical development. It's got this kind of wonderful feral quality connected to the bay and its dynamics, a lot of kind of post-industrial peculiarities. And the organization of this was around, and this is a part of a city where not a lot of people live now. This is organizing it around designing a city for the future and what a real neighborhood might have. So this project's got one of everything. It'll have over 2,000 units of housing, an office component to it, big public park with a sculpture park, and a really a unique engagement with the bay, where development's set far back. A lot of natural processes are kind of the sites are rearranged so those can flow through it. It'll be a pedestrian oriented and priority environment where you go from a transit center to public streets that are designed for people. We're actually looking at a parking garage there that's sort of got a cascading set of steps coming down. Much of it will be where the streets and the fire lanes and driveways are shared, and where kind of public and community life can sort of unfold. And then there'll be places where living is just directly engaged with the park, and this is really unusual on the West Coast. It's also just an unusual opportunity for a landscape architect to have kind of this formative role in shaping a piece of a new piece of the city. It gets very interesting as you sort of leave the vertical development and move towards the edge, where the water systems are much more expressed. There'll be no water from this whole development that will be going to a wastewater facility. It will all be released directly to the estuary, so it'll have a very high quality. There's a robust green infrastructure to do that. And it really sets up these encounters at the edge, designing people back into these post-industrial sites. We're going to see 46 to 96 inches of sea level rise in the next century. So the whole edge has been designed to anticipate this level of change. It will be kind of a radical but slow change, but all of the kind of infrastructure and especially the mobility systems will still function as this transforms over time. At the largest scale, we've been working at scale of the whole city. This is San Rafael, California. It's in Marin County. We were invited to an international competition to talk about sea level rise and think about sea level rise in the Bay Area. Our interest was in finding the city, the place that needs help first. There was a pretty complex analysis done of the whole bay. And we arrived on the city of San Rafael as the place that needed help first. One, because it was let's say in the infrastructural and economic context, it's one of the 4 cities where everything flows through. Yet it identifies as this kind of sleepy little hamlet in Marin County. Today, it looks a lot like a lot of coastal cities. It is packed in. There's lots of uses and infrastructure locking things in place. There are water systems that are changing and they don't have any room to grow. And there's an interface with the estuary of the bay. This neighborhood is subsiding. Their housing stock is sitting low, and the community is there. Is the neediest, mostly immigrant, living more or less hand to mouth. This is one of the kind of workforce communities of the Bay Area, and they would be almost immediately displaced, 10,000 people, by some of these pump failure scenarios that we modeled, where their levee and pump system in a power outage and an earthquake with the right tidal conditions could change the city and displace that population forever. These are really complex problems. I think in the face of sea level rise, this is actually more common. What does the small city do? We've seen what big cities are doing. What does the small city do? The tendency is to want to shut off creeks and estuaries, use hard engineering solutions and do it the old way. But these approaches will continue to accrue risk. That infrastructure will become old one day, and the problems that are kind of deep and profound really have not changed, will not change. So we started to talk about an approach to people, building resilience in place, living life with the bay, not versus the bay. We didn't do this in an insular way. We had a lot of community engagement. This is a toy we designed to explain the dynamics of coastal flooding to a whole range of people. It also works as a drinking game. We made this kind of subversive public service ad that you could kind of drive into any neighborhood and talk about the effects of sea level rise. This is the Flomo, and it's got all of the. It's a big kind of communicator of how sea level rise affects everyone. In the end, we had 5 catalyst projects that we highlighted for this city as a way to begin to address this transformation. First was to make a resilience hub out of a community park, to upgrade their soccer fields, and to give them a big shed for community events, but also this is also a levee, and it's a pump station, so multi-benefit infrastructure projects, and in an emergency it would serve as a response center. We designed a large new reservoir of housing, which is also a reservoir of parking. Parking is a lot of people's entire incomes depend on their vehicle. And this large new reservoir of housing would sponsor the creation of a large new marsh. We started to talk and design a large sediment serger off their coastline that would continue to nourish the mudflats but become a tourist destination, a place to study and research emerging technologies on living shorelines, but also a destination and experience on the water. And the idea was that these catalyst projects, that if you started them early, they would sponsor initiatives, they would grow together over time, and in the end, it would add up to a more resilient city. One of the most interesting questions that we got was like, there's no room to move, and some of our analyses began to get them to turn the corner and see the potential of change once they understood how the city and external forces, globalizing forces, are going to change even this sleepy little town. So this is an example of how we looked at their big box, their auto dealerships, and all of their kind of industrial land uses, and added up to this big composite of land uses that are changing because of external factors that are transforming quickly. And this led to thinking about the possibilities of adapting an entire city to kind of infrastructural change, lifting, literally elevating people's position in life, but also their sort of physical occupation of land to the scale of an entire city. And probably the biggest leap that we made in the process was thinking about this one city's position in the economy of the metropolis, and to shift that mindset from just the individual to much larger interconnected future. Thank you.